And here he is, my one and only sibling, my brother, Stuart Allen Cruz, is here today. Allen, named after Allen Bloom, who was President Pro Tem of the Indiana State Senate and served with our dad, who was a state senator at the time, the youngest one in the nation. And Stuart, after who?
We're trying to figure that out. I was filling out a thing that you fill out as a parent that you're going to give your child when they probably get married or have a child of their own. And I was doing that for our latest child, and I was writing on there, why were you named Stuart? And I said, well, because Dad always said a two-syllable name, first name sounded better with our name because we had a one-syllable last name.
He didn't like Dean Cruz.
Right.
Yeah.
So I called him the other day and I said, Dad, you know why you ended up calling me Stuart? I know why you called me Allen. And he said, yeah, it was after a famous actor or singer or something. Give me some time and I'll think about it and I'll get back with you. I still haven't heard anything.
Well, today I want to talk about something that you talked about in church when you gave a sermon, and it was you're not here by accident, that God's always at work in your life. And you started out with a story about how you almost didn't make it into the world. You want to tell that story?
Sure. Dad had just completed having the first consignment collector car auction in the world in Auburn, Indiana, Labor Day weekend, 1971. And they were planned to have an auction in Cincinnati that next spring. And since Mom had cashiered the Auburn auction, they hired her and two of our other aunts to cashier at the Cincinnati auction. And she was pregnant with me at the time. And they were walking through the hotel lobby getting ready to go to the auction, and Mom in the hotel lobby there obviously had a serious complication with her pregnancy, and so they needed to get her to a hospital pretty quickly. So the guy that Dad was doing the auction with went and got his station wagon, put Mom in it, and rushed her to the hospital and running stoplights, passing people and all that kind of thing. But Mom was pretty scared and worried because she had had some miscarriages before that, and so she was fearful that she was going to lose me too. And so got to the hospital and they got everything under control, and they said they think everything's going to be all right as long as she does 2 weeks of bed rest. And so she spent the next couple days there at the Cincinnati hotel, and then they borrowed the station wagon to take her back and make sure she was laying down and all that. And so she was on 2 weeks of bed rest at home, and she always wants to make sure I tell people that our Aunt Kay brought her the cutest little lunches every day of her 2-week bed rest. And I told the congregation, I said, I'm not sure what a cute lunch looks like, but that's not what I look for when I go out for a meal. I don't want a little cute lunch, whatever that is. But everything went okay. The rest of the pregnancy went pretty smooth. And on October 22nd, 1972, God blessed Mom and Dad with the greatest day of their lives when they welcomed me into the world. And probably
second greatest day?
No, it'd be the greatest. It probably been the favorite ever since. And
now that's true.
It is
true. That's absolutely true. Now look, before we give the clue, you can go to our Facebook site right now and guess which one of us is older. Which one do you think is older? Go ahead and vote right now, because I'm going to give it away. You know, Stuart, that's really interesting because I remember that. And I would have been about 7, right? And what you might not realize, I don't know if we've ever talked about it, but from about the time I was 4, Mom would pray with me on my knees beside her bed each night. And since she lost the little girl that they had named Amy in her 8th month of pregnancy, from that point on, we prayed, Dear Jesus, please give me a little brother. And so I prayed that prayer every night for 3 years. And then there you were with a full head of black hair, and man, was your skin dark. It was really dark. Back then, you know, we couldn't go in the delivery room and all that. And so I remember at DeKalb Memorial Hospital standing outside the window and looking in and thought, oh my goodness. And then I remember coming off the school bus the first day you were home and walking in and looking at you in the bassinet in their room. And I was pretty shocked at how much hair and how dark you were. It's interesting.
Yeah. Obviously, I didn't keep the hair.
No, you didn't. You didn't.
That would have been nice.
But you know, 7 years apart, and you start, liking sports. I'm liking sports. I'm living life just a little bit ahead of you. And then in high school, I got the opportunity to coach you in basketball. You remember that?
Oh, yeah.
It was 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th, right?
Yep.
What are your favorite memories of that?
Well, Dad was kind of a co-coach, although he traveled a
Right.
lot, so he couldn't really help us out much. But I remember the first year, Dad said, if we're going to be a team, we got to look like a team. And so he went out and bought warm-up suits for the whole team, sweatpants, sweatshirts, the whole 9 yards. I was embarrassed to tears because none of the other teams had any of that stuff.
Right.
But it was fun, and I remember you coaching us, and I remember you getting a technical one time.
Easy.
It was a guy was trying to steal the ball from me, and Mitch said, next time he tries to do that, he should get an elbow in the face. And the ref stopped, boom, calls a technical, and Mitch says, what did I do? What did I say? And he said, you're telling your son or your brother to throw an elbow. And Mitch said, that's not what I'm saying, but what you really meant was my elbow should be protecting the ball, and if he comes in to steal it, his face should hit my elbow.
And we had worked on that, right?
Right.
Yeah. I was frustrated with you.
Yes, oh yeah, which wasn't the first time.
And I knew the referee, and I've grown a lot since then.
Yeah.
But we did well.
We did. We went into the championship game our 4th grade year and lost to my best friend. And then 6th grade year, we got a rematch in the championship game against him, and we beat his butt.
Yes, we did. We did. And I remember that was the same night as my senior year sectional championship game.
That's right.
And that's where, after the game, I stayed afterwards and shot 300 free throws at one of the baskets.
Mm-hmm.
And I got fouled at the end of our sectional championship game with 1 in bonus. Remember that?
Yep.
And I ended up shooting the free throws at that same basket. I felt like I could have made them with my eyes closed because of what I'd done just a few hours earlier there. That was so much fun. And then you had quite a basketball career. I remember, I think it was 6th grade, I wrote into Sports Illustrated because you averaged like 30 points a game.
31.
31 points a game. Not that you computed.
Not that it appeared, but
And then, was it 10 rebounds?
yeah.
And 10 assists.
Right.
Right. So I want you to hear that again. He averaged in 6th grade, not as like the tallest kid on the court or anything like that, 30 points a game, 31 points a game, 10 rebounds and 10 assists. I mean, it was unbelievable, the talent that you had. And then you went to camp, I think it was at Notre Dame, and something happened there. You want to share that?
Yeah, I had obviously coming from a basketball family, living in Indiana, being on the varsity basketball team was my dream, and had watched you do it, wanted to follow in your footsteps, and went to a Notre Dame basketball camp the summer before my freshman year of high school, and was out guarding a guy, and he was coming along the perimeter, and I was sliding, defensive slide, and all of a sudden my knee gave out, and never felt that before, didn't really understand what was going on there, kind of limped off the court and thought maybe I could just walk it off and everything would be all right. And but long story short, what ended up happening is I found out that my kneecaps are abnormally too high, and so they very easily can go out of place. And so it wasn't really a pain situation, it wasn't a surgery situation, it was just an instability situation. And so I tried staying in basketball freshman, sophomore year. By my junior year, I got cut from the team because the coach said I wasn't tall enough to be underneath and I wasn't quick enough to play the perimeter, and he was right.
So you could still shoot the lights out?
Yeah, so baseball was the only thing I could stick with then in high school. But when I look back on it, it actually ended up being a good thing because once I got cut from the team and baseball was my only sport, it gave me a lot more free time than in the fall and winter time frame. So I started attending, I had always gone to our youth group at church and that kind of thing, but this allowed me to give more time to that. And it was through that and things that I ended up changing my life. And on a trip, it was a missions trip to South Dakota at an Indian reservation where I ended up giving my life to Christ and really committing myself to Him and understanding what that means. I was at that missions trip, I was given the responsibility to tell these 4 and 5-year-olds how they could give their life to Jesus and that kind of thing. And I remember asking them, the first question I had to ask them was, have you ever sinned? And they just looked at me and said, no. And I said, well, yeah, you have. And then and I tried to explain that to him. And I remember walking away from that experience thinking, you know, for the longest time I've played being a Christian in my life. I mean, if people looked at me, they'd say, yeah, he goes to church, he seems like a pretty good guy, he's probably a Christian. And I would have said I was a Christian. But in that experience, I thought, I can't even explain my faith to 4- and 5-year-old kids. So maybe there's something wrong here. And so I remember we were traveling back in the youth van from South Dakota to Chicago. We were going to take a break there in Chicago, go to an amusement park. And while we were driving, the youth pastor started talking about his life. And that was Bob Herman at the time, then became senior pastor at County Line. But he started talking about how in his life growing through high school and early college, he was one guy at school and then another guy at church. And he said, I was living this dual lifestyle, and it got to a point where I just hated not being the same guy everywhere I was. And I'm sitting there thinking, that's my life. You know, I'm playing this Christian thing at church, making everybody think I'm a good Christian guy at church, but then at school, I'm right in with all the joking and all the stuff going on at school and all that kind of thing. And so I'm living this dual lifestyle. And as he's saying he was tired of it, I was thinking, man, me too. I'm tired of that. So I'm sitting there, tears coming down my eyes, and we stopped the van in the parking lot, and I held back. All the other youth got out, and as the light came on in the van, my girlfriend at the time was sitting beside me, and I look at her, and she's got tears coming down her eyes. And I get a little emotional about it, sorry. Because I ended up marrying her, and she's my wife. And to have that experience together where we fully understood what it meant to commit our lives to Christ for real was a great experience to have together that we've never forgotten.
I'd like you to address that a little bit about I had lived a dual life because, again, you know, I probably know you as well as anybody knows you, and I think it'd be easy for somebody to say, you haven't sinned that much. So I'd like you to describe that, because I think a lot of people who watch maybe grew up in a Christian home, grew up in the church like you, and maybe have never really understood their sin against a holy God.
Sure. I think what I had to come to the realization was that even though I professed a belief in Jesus Christ, life was still all about me. I maybe had that mentality of God bless me in my endeavors, you know, in my sports or in my occupation in life. Bless me as I pursue my dreams and my aspirations. And I think a lot of people get into that, fall into that trap of just, you know, God bless me and everything I want to do. And I think where you come to a realization that life, true life, is about God, not about me. And that my prayer changes from God bless me and my dreams and my aspirations to God, what do you want me to do with my life? What occupation do you want me to have? What do you want me to do today to impact others around me? And being much more submissive to the Lordship of God in my life, rather than trying to play the game where God's my Lord, but yet I'm going to still be in control. You see what I'm saying?
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. The way we try to say it in Restoration Road is it's living a life of saying to God, I can't, you can. And so often we want to say, I can, God, and maybe you can't.
Right.
Well, you graduated from high school. I think you were student council president, right?
Right.
And you spoke at your graduation. I still remember the opening line.
Yep.
You remember it?
You can't read, you can't write, you can't do arithmetic.
That's right.
And I was referring back to, I said the year is 19, whatever it was, and I said that we were entering, our class was the first grade to go, the first sixth grade to go into the junior high. Prior to that, it was 7th, 8th, and 9th.
Right.
And then they switched it to have a middle school, 6th, 7th, and 8th. And so we were the first ones to go into 6th grade together. And but I was referring back to when we first started school together, and then how we ended up being that first class that went in, and all the changes that we had to experience and that kind of thing. So
exactly. And it was a tremendous speech. I remember it was outside. And then you decided where you were going to go to college. You decided to go to IPFW.
Yep.
And what'd you major in?
Majored in political science, which a lot of good that's done me over the years. I started out majoring in business because I was going to go into our family business in the auction business. I thought that's probably a good thing to do. But I hated it. I remember I was in a microeconomics class, I was in an accounting class, and I just hated every minute of it and thought, why am I doing this? I want to do something I like. So at the time, I thought I might have some political aspirations somewhere down the line to run for office or something. And so I thought, well, I'll do political science, so I'll do the business thing for a while, then someday when I run for office, I'll have this political science background. And so I did that instead, and then went into the family business. And then I kind of got involved in politics. I was the vice chairman for the party, for our party in DeKalb County, and I really kind of got disenchanted with the whole thing and how the process works and that kind of thing. And I thought, you know, this isn't for me, so I got out of that. And
then what was going on the business front inside you? I think you felt a calling of some kind. I want you to explain it and what was going on and how you felt about the family business.
You probably heard Dad say this over the years. He would say to us at an auction afterwards, we'd be driving in the car, and he'd say, boy, it sure isn't working when you do what you love, is it?
Yes, he did.
And I would sit there in the car thinking, I don't love what I do. I don't, but I wouldn't tell him that because it was his dream and his business he had built, and I didn't want to hurt his feelings. But I didn't, there were aspects I liked, but I didn't love it.
Right.
And I didn't see it the way he saw it. And it wasn't until some things happened in our business where I kind of went our separate ways, and I decided to pursue ministry. And then once I got into the pastoring role at our church that we grew up in, which was kind of ironic that happened, I then began to see what Dad was talking about, that it isn't work when you do what you love. And I never knew how much contentment you could have in an occupation until I had done the pastoring role.
So you transitioned out of Cruise International, and you started serving at County Line, and then did you enroll at Huntington University to get your master's in pastoral ministries?
Right, I did that, and that's kind of how it came about. As our senior pastor at the time had a heart attack and had to step away from ministry, and the associate pastor at the time, Bob Herman, stepped into the senior pastor role. And since I was pursuing ministry, they had asked me if I would be interested, and I said, of course I would be. It's the church I grew up in. But backing up a little bit, when I was I actually took a class at Taylor University before I went to Huntington. And in that class, I had a professor by the name of Dr. Bieberstein. You probably know him. And I talked to him about that desire I had to be at my home church. And I said, I really want to be there, but I feel like I'm putting God in a box. And he said, you are putting God in a box.
Wow.
And he says, you can't say, I want to be a pastor, but I only want to be a pastor at this particular church. Wow. And after he talked to me about that, I let go of it. And I said, God, I'll be a pastor. I don't care where you take me. I don't care where it goes. I'll do it. And it wasn't a month later that they called me at our home church and said, would you be willing to come here? So it's kind of like the Bible says, God gave me the desire of my heart, but it wasn't until I had totally surrendered that to him and said, I'll go wherever you want me to.
That's huge. Yeah. And so he orchestrated in you the desires of your heart, which were his. Well, it hasn't been totally smooth sailing as a pastor, right?
Sure.
And you were functioning as an associate, and Bob Herman was a senior, and then something really tragic happened. You want to describe where you were at that moment?
Well, I had mentioned Bob Herman was the youth pastor back when I was in the van on our mission trip when I recommitted my life to Christ. And I was the associate pastor for him, so we really had a really awesome relationship with him as the senior pastor, me as the associate for about 9.5 years or so. And he had a stroke about 1.5 years ago. And it was the most amazing thing because he was in my office. We were laughing and talking just like normal. He left that day, went to pick up his kids at school, and while he was at the school picking them up is when he had his stroke. And thankfully, he lived through it, but it was really a miraculous thing because I guess there's a small vein that runs right through here that not everybody has. Some people have it, some people don't. It's just one of those things. And because he had that little vein, it allowed the blood to travel from the one side to the other side, which saved his life. Had he not had that little vein right there, he would have died. But through the complications of the stroke, he wasn't able to fully come back. He waited almost a year. Then it was just determined that couldn't make it back into the ministry and concentrate, on the things that you have to concentrate on. So he resigned, and then they asked me if I would want to step up into the senior pastor position, and so I did.
You had been preaching about every other Sunday, and then you preached every Sunday while he was in recovery, right? And I think another little God thing is he had his stroke at Lakewood Park Christian School, right, in the parking lot, and if he'd have been alone, he probably would have passed away as well, right?
Or if he would have had it while he was driving.
Yeah, that's true.
And I got to give a lot of thanks to Bob in that he mentored me, he trained me, he allowed me as an associate pastor to use a lot of my gifts and passions that a lot of senior pastors don't do. It's kind of their show, and everybody else stay out of my way. And he was really big on team atmosphere and allowed, like you mentioned, he allowed me to preach every other week, which a lot of senior pastors wouldn't do that. And so he really allowed me to train. I was kind of in training all those years with him, and then when the time came to take the position over, that it was a smooth transition.
That's and it has been, and the church has grown so much. And you're both out of the legacy of Al Black. I think he was our senior pastor for 21 years, right?
Yep.
And I even see so much of his mannerisms in you. And today the church has an average attendance over 1,000 people, right?
That might be stretching a little bit. We're in the 900 range. We're getting close to 1,000. But.
And our great-great-grandfather co-founded it 110 years ago. Is that about right?
A little over that, yep. 113 years
113 years ago. And it's just amazing. I doubt that they could have ever foreseen what's going on now. And the hearts and lives of the people that are being changed, transformed to be like Christ. The baptism service we just did at the New Pond, that was so much fun. And to see the impact that your ministry has. But the thing I think it's still in its infancy and growth, because I see the ripple effect of your relationships has brought a whole new group of people in, but we are just on the beginning of the ripple effect of their relationships. Do you see that at work? You see what I mean? Like when somebody new comes in because they were connected to you or connected to somebody who was connected to you. Well, now they have a whole sphere of relationships of their own that aren't connected to the church.
Yeah, that's been really exciting. Is one of our goals that we set forth to our congregation is by the end of every year, that last Sunday in December, that you can look around the church and point to one individual or one family and say, they're here because I invited them. And we say, that's not too much to ask, really. You've got 365 days in a year to invite one person to church, to get them, come into our church and things. And it's not to build numbers, it's just to keep that outreach focus in the front of their minds, so that life's just not all about them, but they keep remembering that we're supposed to be out there trying to reach more people for Christ. And what has happened is, and like you said, as somebody comes to church and they find it a meaningful experience, they invite their friend, and then that friend comes, and if it's a meaningful experience for them, they go out and invite their circle, and it's really kind of neat to see when you see the train of an individual who's coming, their life's been impacted by Christ, and then you backtrack it and say, well, who invited them, and it's kind of a neat train to see how that works.
It is. As you just talked there, I see how the Holy Spirit has led you throughout your whole life, even made sure that you would intervene to bring you on this scene of events now. And you had a Holy Spirit prompting on a much more personal level that Tisha was having at the same time. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, we had a daughter, 1996, and then a couple years later, we lost a baby late in the pregnancy. And that was really hard. It was very late in the pregnancy, and I remember being very mad at God. Because Tish had to deliver essentially a dead baby, and so they had to induce her, and she was going through all the normal pain of a normal delivery like any woman would. But I knew it was all to just deliver a baby that wasn't even alive. And I remember going into the bathroom that was connected to her hospital room, and I just was yelling at God and said, how can you allow this? You have the power to stop this pain, and you're not. And I would just yell and scream at him. And then I'd go back out and watch her in all her pain, and nothing would change. And I'd go back in and yell at him again, and said things that I just can't even believe I said to him. But then when it was all over, the baby was delivered and everything was over, I remember this enormous guilt came over me, and I went to the chapel there in the hospital and just bowed before God and said, I am so sorry for all the things I said to you during that time. And it was really nice. The hospital came in, they gave us a flyer that a local church had provided for people who had lost a baby. And I was kind of looking through that, and I saw a phrase in there that says, you're probably really angry at God and said things you can't believe you said. And I go, that's me.
Wow.
And I kept reading, and it said, that's okay. Because we live in a fallen world and bad things are going to happen to people, it makes God mad too. And when you're going through everything you're going through, he was as angry as you were that people he loves have to go through the kind of stuff they're going through. And that really helped me understand that God was okay with me bearing my heart to him and how frustrated I was. Excuse me. But so we, as a result of that, then it was difficult for Tish to get pregnant again. So we kind of started thinking about adoption at that point, but then all of a sudden, we were praying, as you did for me, we were praying that God would give us just a strong, healthy child. And he gave us Logan, who was off the charts in height, weight, everything.
What an athlete.
Yeah, and we just thought, wow, God really answered that, literally. But then, I don't know, 13, 14 months after that, they're very close in age, Kenley came along. Mm-hmm. So we had thought about adoption, but then didn't need to in our minds because we had to, but that adoption thing just kept rolling over in our minds. And so Tish had a moment where she told me that she felt God was really telling her strongly we needed to adopt. And I wasn't really sure about it yet. And I did a sermon on Abraham and his faith. And it was during that sermon that I thought, what am I doing? Who am I to say, no, I don't want to adopt? And so Tish and I kind of felt like God was taking care of one of ours that we'd lost, and now he's telling us to take care of one of his. And so we decided to go the foreign adoption route, and we ended up going to China and adopting Rena over there. And we just been back with her just about 2.5 months or so, and she's awesome.
And she's already like in our family.
Yep.
Just a piece of work.
She's always been here.
We just love her. Stuart, we have about 30 seconds left. I wonder if you would just share with those watching about 2 gates, 2 roads, 2 destinations.
Okay. Jesus said when he walked the earth that there were 2 gates. One was wide and very easily traveled, and that's the life apart from God that a lot of people take that's very easy. But he said that road leads to destruction. But he said there was a narrow gate and a narrow path that leads to life, and only a few find it. And I would encourage you to not take that easy road that everybody takes apart from God, because the world tries to say we're all here by accident. But I don't believe that. I just don't believe that, and I think God made us, created us, and he wants to be a part of your everyday life, and I want you to try to seek out that narrow road, and know if you do, it'll bring you more peace and fulfillment that you've ever had in your life.
Stewie, thanks.
All right.